Home after 4 months in an Ethiopian prison, the case of journalist Amir Aman Kiaro reflects dire conditions for Ethiopia's press freedom.
At the first annual International Forum of Stakeholders on the Development of the Lake Chad Basin, Nigeria's Vice President affirms the success of cross-border interventions in the fight against terrorism.
With rising food prices across West Africa, some Senegalese Muslim families celebrating Ramadan rely on donations to break their fasts.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in to the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Joke Rogers at Channels Television here in Lagos, and I'm joined by Vincent McCory from the Voice of America in Washington.
Well, thanks. I'm Vincent McCory at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Channels Television in Lagos brings you that story.
The Vice President of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, has affirmed that collaborations on military action and cross-border security interventions are yielding results in the fight against terrorism. He made this known at the first annual International Forum of Stakeholders on the Development of the Lake Chad Basin Commission in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory. Our correspondent, Dele Omoyeni, brings us this report.
The Forum for the Development of the Lake Chad Basin is organized by the Lake Chad Basin Commission and the governments of Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and Nigeria to address the major challenges in the region like climate change and insecurity.
Thank you.
The Executive Secretary of the Lake Chad Basin Commission says PROLAC is one of the projects put in place to support the implementation of the 9 pillars of the regional strategy for stabilization.
As we are all aware, the forum is organized as part of the implementation of the Lake Chad Region Recovery and Development Project, PROLAC. It is a platform that brings together high-level local and international stakeholders to facilitate exchanges on the progress made in the implementation of PROLAC, to deepen conversations and harmonization of existing national and regional initiatives and strategies, and to enable planning of new initiatives for closer cooperation to enhance stabilization in the Lake Chad region.
The Vice President, Yemi Osinbajo, says Lake Chad Basin is strategic to the region, hence it remains a priority of government, especially when it comes to security.
The results and recommendations of this forum are to be transmitted to the various governments to guide policy making and strategic decisions that need to be taken in the short and long term, related, of course, to the development of the region. And I can assure you that the federal government of Nigeria will be an active participant in turning these recommendations into firm actions. I'm confident of the same level of willingness of the governments of Cameroon, Chad, and Niger, which is, of course, evidenced by their presence here today.
The Lake Chad Regional Recovery and Development Project, PROLAC, aims to strengthen the foundations of regional cooperation and support concerted investments to improve access to regional markets to boost cross-border and regional trade. Dele Omoyeni, Channels Television News.
Thank you very much.
Joining us to discuss this is a global defense and national security specialist and a doctorate researcher in conflict resolution, Mr. Olumide Wole Madariola. Glad to have you today on Africa 54.
Thank you so much, Miss.
So for over a decade, the Lake Chad region has been challenged with exacerbated violent extremism and, of course, protracted humanitarian emergencies, resulting in the displacement of more than 2.3 million people, majority of them children and women, of course. What do you think is fueling the crisis in the region?
I mean, that is a bit scary when I hear of the figures involved in these circumstances. In the first instance, aside the competition for resources that is known to be one of the major causes of this crisis, the internal security of the 4 nations that Lake Chad saddles and the political instability in those nations have really been affecting the whole crisis. That's one of the things that is fueling it. And principally, when it comes to proliferation of firearms, small arms, so to speak, the arms economy in that region is so scary. It's booming. It's an economy that no one really wants to stop. And when I mean no one, the people benefiting from it. And the flow of arms from Libya, the starting point of that was the genocide, Rwanda, you have the civil war in Liberia, you have the Sudan issue there, and the fall of Gaddafi. So the whole of that stuff has made terrorists in Nigeria, in Chad, in Cameroon, in Niger, the bandits, all of them, they continue to demand for those arms, and those arms kept coming from that region and the whole of that flow of that road. So that's one of the things falling in at the moment. And another thing is the failure of governance, if I must say, and you have sabotage. I think there should be sabotage going on, because when you have people, there's no way those arms can move from those locations coming into that place and coming down the south, down the central region of Nigeria without an inside work, One of the things we can also talk about is the misplaced priorities by crisis managers, the crisis managers of the present day crisis managers, people from the commission that they said was set up there. The issue affecting the populace of that place are not being prioritized, and that's one of the things. The insensitivity to the real need of the people. Those are the things fueling the crisis, I guess.
And considering that most countries in the Lake Chad region are faced with one security challenge or the other, how well will you say that the international collaboration and collaborations in the domain of military action and cross-border security interventions have worked?
For me, it's a very laudable thing for example, the joint force to be set up. It's a quite wonderful initiative. But I want to draw my answer from what the President Deby said. In April 2020, the man came out and I said, look here, I'm overwhelmed by this war. The bulk of the war has been passed on to me. I can't cope again, and I'm just going to concentrate on Chad alone. In March 2021, when he came to Abuja, he restated it, and he said something. He said the joint task force, he said, has not been productive. He said the expectant impact has not been felt at all. He said, how can, and I quote him, he said, how can the joint task force go on one single operation for 1 year? So I don't know the measurements of the impact of the collaborative effort. For me, I think that indicators for that impact should be, those people have access to peace, they have access to their livelihood, have the people that are displaced have been rehoused, how much of income opportunities have been created for the youth. We need to think of all of this.
So what more can stakeholders across the region do to sustain and achieve more economic stability and peace within the Lake Chad region?
Basically, for me, I would just say responsible leaders who really want to do something, they must be having every sense of urgency. There's need for a sense of urgency. You need to engage the people. A typical farmer in that environment doesn't know what climate change is. People need to be engaging to tell them what is going on, the real issue that is going on, and how they should be ready for change, and how that change is going to affect them. And that is what is going to give room to innovation. That's what is going to make them to accept modernization, all the agricultural effort, and the whole issue of harder farmers crisis can all be sorted out. One of the things I can also think of is that the mandate of the agencies that are responsible for the crisis, right? The mandates must be prioritized. The mandates must be reformed. They must know what they want to do. They must be made accountable. They must be made seriously accountable. You can't leave people that are hungry, people who doesn't have home to stay, people who are displaced, young people who doesn't have source of income, and you keep on investing money on solar powered whatever. I mean, that's secondary. Those are the issues that must be thought of solidly. Another thing is, forces like multinational joint task force, that can be restructured. And what they can do regarding that is that they can transform that into a very formidable defensive setup, just like NATO. Another thing I think should be very, 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 very important to do is the setting up of an environmental security summit. In 2019, the Prime Minister Theresa May in London here, there was the issue of violent crime. And what did she do? She called for a security summit. I was part of that summit. I made a recommendation. The recommendation was implemented. And the department that was meant to do it did it very, very swiftly. One of the single things that can be done is for environmentalists, ecologists, diplomats, security experts to be gathered together. Let them evaluate the circumstances, the issue on ground, let them review it, let them revisit things, let them see how far they've gone, and let them be able to come up with recommendations for the government. Let the government be able to say, okay, this is what we're going to accept, this is what we're going to be doing, and that will take us to the next level.
Right, thank you for your thoughts on that. Defense Specialist Olumide Wole Madariola, thank you so much for joining us today on Africa 54.
Thank you so much, Miss.
As more people flee Ukraine to neighboring countries to escape the war, Poland is seeing an influx of refugees at its border. Among the displaced is a Ukrainian Ghanaian family. Viewers Merim Gawe with Karina Chowdhury spoke to the family and filed this report.
Since Russia invaded Ukraine in late February, Poland has received some 2 million refugees. Many have arrived in the Polish border town of Medyka, one of the main border crossings with Ukraine. Lilia Chengpong and daughters Esther and Jasmine are among those who made the crossing in Medyka. Esther Chengpong, a human resources manager from Kiev, says the journey was not easy.
It is really terrible and really hard to understand, and I feel so tired and exhausted, yeah.
At the camp in Medyka, they grabbed some food before boarding a bus to Germany. Lilia Chengpong's husband, Samson, is Ghanaian. She met him while he was studying in Ukraine.
We have four children, and he loved Ukraine, and he decided to stay, not to leave.
What does he do there?
He's a pastor of the church. Yeah, he's pastoring the people and praying with people. Now he is supporting them, encouraging them that we will win. Ukraine will win, definitely.
Esther Chengpong shows a photo of her father and two brothers. Her mother describes the pain of leaving behind her husband and sons, who don't look like most other Ukrainians.
I feel like lonely and like separated, you understand? Only girls with me, and my husband is there, and my sons. Because they are Ukrainians. Like, of course, they look like not citizens of Ukraine, but they're Ukrainians. They were born in Ukraine.
With their lives now packed into 3 suitcases and backpacks, Lilia Chengpong and her daughters continue toward Germany, hoping to reunite with the rest of their family soon.
We don't know what is going to happen with them. If they will stay, we believe that God will protect them. And we believe that hopefully when the war finishes, we will come home, because we want to live in our country.
Merim Gawe, VOA News, Medyka, Poland.
One young Ghanaian is on a mission to reduce the country's glass waste and what he considers wasteful imports. He says it doesn't want broken glass pieces littered or dumped into a landfill. Michael Tete makes dozens of eclectic molten glass balls every week from recycled TV screens, window panes and soda bottles.
Michael Tete, Ghana's only professional glassblower, clenched his teeth as he gripped a red-hot ball of molten glass. His burned and blistered hands bare against the steaming stack of wet newspaper he used to protect them. The 44-year-old toiled in the heat of scrap metal kilns burning at nearly 1,500 Celsius, loaded with melted window paint, TV screens and soda bottles. He would soon transform into elaborate vases swirling with psychedelic color. Some become red vases with streaks of black, others green pitchers, and some clear everyday bottles.
Glass that I learned in the bead making, it became like my passion. It's like my heart. So all the time I want to blow glass. And glass is a wonderful work. You see how you are working with glass, it's expand. And it's like life, you see. Yes, it's like life, it is expand. Life also expand. It's like a journey. Yes, you go from one after the other. Yes, so I love glass. And the glass is beautiful.
Teta's strict use of recycled materials, which he collects from scrap yards and landfills in the capital, Accra, is part of a stated mission to reduce Ghana's glass waste and what he considers wasteful imports. He envisions a Ghana free of foreign glass, having channeled its glass bead-making tradition into a modern, multifaceted industry. Janice Ofe, 28-year-old and one of 8 women who Tete has taught, said that having the hot shop in town has been a game-changer for some of Odumase Krobo's young people. It provided both a work opportunity and a creative outlet for people who had neither.
We are hoping maybe support will come and establish our business so that we can employ more youth.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Now, the case of a journalist for the Associated Press accused of abating a government-designated terrorist group for reporting on rebels highlights Ethiopia's decline in media freedom, according to advocates. VOA's Salim Solomon has the story.
Amir Aman Kiaro is back home with his family after a 4-month ordeal in an Ethiopian prison. But the video journalist for the Associated Press could still face jail if convicted of violating anti-terrorism and wartime state of emergency laws. First arrested in November, Amir is accused of illegally communicating with members of a group the government designated as a terrorist organization. Under a state of emergency that was in place until February, journalists could be penalized for interviewing members of armed groups, including the Oromo Liberation Army. Amir and a freelancer, Thomas Ingeda, were detained but never charged, the AP says.
The crackdown on the media that this case represents, there is truly no true accusation that can be leveled against Amir. He is a respected, balanced journalist who has covered both sides of the conflict. He's been picked up, and this is an arbitrary detention.
With a shrinking space for reporting, several Ethiopian journalists called on the government to respect media rights. In 2021 alone, their open letter says 46 journalists were detained, making Ethiopia one of the worst jailers of journalists in Africa.
The general optimism that we had a couple of years ago with the much heralded reform, with the promises that journalists would be able to operate unperturbed, this has not panned out. The promises and the pledges did not materialize. And unfortunately, for journalists, the situation is starting to mirror what we saw in 2009, when Ethiopia passed its infamous anti-terror proclamation, which was used to round up journalists en masse. So we had to speak up about a very, very dire situation that our colleagues on the ground in Ethiopia are facing.
With little coverage of daily life in rebel-controlled regions like Oromia, the work of reporters like Amir is vital, says Zacharias.
Very few journalists have been able to gain access to areas under control of the OLA, and what life has been like for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in these areas, much of which have been subjected to internet and phone outages, we don't have an accurate picture of.
Amir's lawyer, Tadele Gebramedin, says his client has been ordered to not leave the country until the case is investigated. He's accused of working with foreign media outlets and, quote, spoiling the country's development plans, end quote, through negative reporting. VOA reached out to the Office of the Prime Minister, the Communications Ministry, and the Attorney General's office requesting comment, but received no response. Phillips says it's important to shine a light on cases like this.
We will continue to cover the story of journalists who are unjustly held. This is not acceptable behavior. These are arbitrary detentions. If there is proof of something, then that evidence has to be surfaced and has to go through a proper trial process. It's something that is extremely important to us at the AP and to our peer news organizations.
For now, Amir is free, but the risk of arrest for those in media is ever present. Salim Solomon, VOA News, Washington.
A ceremony has been held at the Museum of Libya in Tripoli to showcase 9 ancient artifacts returned by the United States Department of Homeland Security. During the years of chaos that followed the 2011 NATO-backed uprising, some of the country's museums were looted by treasure hunters and the antiques shipped to the United States.
Libyan authorities have received 9 ancient artifacts, including stone heads, urns and pottery, that were returned by the United States after being smuggled out of the North African country. All the pieces had been illegally excavated and shipped to the United States, but they were identified by archaeologists working with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office in New York and have been returned to the Museum of Libya in Tripoli. The pottery includes patterned jars. All the pieces are now in the museum located in the central Tripoli palace of King Idris, who was ousted in 1969 and which has been closed to the public since the 2011 uprising. Once a major province of the Roman Empire and home to spectacular coastal ruins, Libya has a wealth of archaeological sites and its museums boast an array of ancient treasure. However, during the years of chaos that have followed the 2011 NATO-backed uprising, some of its museums were looted and numerous sites were pillaged by treasure hunters digging in the ground. Director of the United Nations Interregional Crime and Justice Research Institute, Antonia Maria de Meo, says he appreciates the effort of the Libyan authorities.
We are very proud to work with the Libyan authorities for the return of these really important cultural antiquities today. The process to return cultural antiquities is incredibly complex. It requires massive partnership. In this case, there was a partnership with the U.S. authorities. The Manhattan DA's office was involved in a criminal investigation that uncovered these particular works. And then there was a cooperation on the U.S. side to the Libyan consulate in Washington, D.C. And we were involved behind the scenes, working also together with the Lermo to coordinate this and also with the NGO to manage the transportation and delivery. As you can tell, there's many actors required, but when we work together for cooperation, we're able to actually achieve a success like today.
After major antiquities looting following the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003 and in Syria during the war after its own 2011 uprising, militant groups raised money by trading in antiquities, drawing greater involvement from police.
The price of staple foods like rice, onions and oil is rising in Senegal, leaving some Muslim families who are celebrating Ramadan relying on charity. David Doyle of Reuters has more.
In Senegal's capital Dakar, Astou Mandiang is preparing to break fast. But this year, there's no meat on the table. While Muslims celebrate the holy month of Ramadan, food prices in Senegal have been rising. Mandiang says fish, much cheaper than meat in the ocean-facing West African country, is the only animal protein she can afford. And she had to stockpile other ingredients in advance.
I bought foods that were likely to increase in price, such as onions. When I went to the market and saw the increase in onion prices, I was reassured to have it in stock, because I had anticipated it. It won't last until the end of the month, but it will last us a while.
Like many others, Mandiang has now turned to the kindness of strangers. Dimbel Jabut has been distributing food to families in need during Ramadan. Gang Sabore, the association's president, says the cost of a bag of rice has risen by 9.5% since last year.
Before Ramadan, a number of families contacted me. Some of them were crying when they called me and said it is very difficult. The price of rice has gone up, same for sugar and oil, so it's very difficult.
Food prices across West Africa have increased by between 20 and 30% over the past 5 years. Aid agencies say that's driven by a fall in production and availability. Drought and conflict have pushed millions off farmland, while the global health crisis disrupted supply chains. In addition, the war in Ukraine has caused a spike in global food prices.
Well, and that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Channels Television has our last word from Lagos.
We look forward to bringing you another show next week. To remember that channelstv.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Joke Rogers. Thanks for watching and goodbye.